So we've got two things here reported by two different trans journalists who you should follow both of. So this is Erin Reed from Erin in the Morning and Ari Drennan, who is with maybe she's on her own at the moment. Okay, she's not with a group. Great. They're both nice people. And disclaimer, I've talked to them both and they both seem nice. And Erin's also been on the same show as me a few times. So Erin here reports, major news. A court in Montana has declared one of their bills that defines sex in a way that ends the legal recognition of trans people in Montana is facially unconstitutional. And this is the first time a bill defining sex has been ruled on, which is a huge win. So here it says, the state has provided no evidence that trans women are likely to silence cis women. I mean, like, obviously, because they've got no evidence. And again, they're trying to use this, like, J.K. Rowling gender critical argument still in the US of, like, they're trying to silence, trans people are trying to silence biological females or whatever. But that might have worked in the UK in 2016. But now in 2025 in Trump's America, like, there's a new headline every single day about how they're erasing LGBT people from history or, you know, banning trans people from working in the military and stuff. And they're still trying to claim that trans people are silencing cis people. Like just delusional that they would even try this as a strategy. Completely nonsense. So here it says as well, there is no compelling state interest in eviscerating protections against sex discrimination for individuals whose gender identities do not align with their biological sex. Not a fan of that framing, but still it's good news. As such interest would be permitting sex discrimination towards a minority population in violation of policy of the state. So, yeah, we'll finish this ruling and then we'll come back to that. It is intellectually and morally indefensible. And Erin says, damn. So, I mean, that's a pretty good ruling. And then we got another one here from Ari saying, Trump's lawyers are absolutely flailing in the courts right now. And this is quite a good little exchange, which, again, is where, like, gender critical ideology, like, butts up against the reality of things. So the judge is saying that this order adopts definitions of a separate executive order, blah, 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 that states sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological characteristic. A classification is either male or female, and states that it's the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. Do you see that, or do you remember it? And then this person's like, I'll take the court's word for it. It's so lame. You understand, as a matter of biology, it is just incorrect that there are only two sexes, right? Do I understand that to be incorrect as a biological matter? Yes. It is incorrect as a biological matter. You understand that, right? I don't understand that. You understand that not everyone has XX or XY chromosomes, right? Honestly, no, I don't. I mean, I don't actually know. I mean, I guess this is one of Trump's lawyers. I'm not surprised they don't know. You can only, go into court and defend these ridiculous anti-science things if you have no idea what you're talking about. And amazingly, the judge seems to have some idea of what they're talking about. So the judge here says, it's actually kind of really important point because this executive order is premised on the assertion that's not biologically correct. There are anywhere near about 30 different intersex examples. So someone who does not have just XX or XY chromosomes is not just male or female, they're intersex. And there are over 30 potential different intersex examples. We've got genetic differences, blah, 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 blah. Again, I'm not really a massive fan of this, but the judge at least seems clued into the fact that the statement is biologically incorrect. So that is definitely a win. And of course, Ari's pointed out that Fox News is instantly attacking the judge and saying that they're openly LGBTQ and that therefore they're biased. So maybe all straight judges are too biased to rule in any cases involving straight people. But yeah, so they're both good news. So in terms of how this pans out. From following what's going on in the kind of pushback against Trump stuff, it does seem that people have some faith in the courts. It's good that they do. I don't know if I had faith. I have faith in. I don't have faith in the UK courts. I don't know if I have faith in the US courts, and I'm pretty sure that the Supreme Court is garbage. I think it could go either way. I think it's good that the courts are doing something and pushing back against these extreme and ridiculous rulings. I know that there's also one currently going on pushing back against the military ban, and it's quite likely that most or all of these attempts to remove trans people from public life will fall down in a court, and then they'll go to the next level of court. And as we've seen with the anti-abortion movement and what the gender criticals are doing in the UK, they don't really care. Like, there's nothing really at stake for them here. But they can win if they throw 1,000 ridiculous legal situations upon 1,000 different judges. 999 of them rule for, like, you know, the reality common sense ruling. You've only got to have one whacker who rules the other way, and then they've gained a little bit of ground. And certainly when the Supreme Court is like, you know, some far right dominated landscape, if they do manage to appeal it and it goes up and up and up and it gets to the Supreme Court, the odds of it going in LGBT people's favour is much lower. But also, I mean, Trump really is trying to just be like a dictator. And I know people are like, oh, will you even have elections again in the US in the next 4 years? I mean, I don't know. It's not impossible that you won't, but I don't think it's certain that you won't. And I don't know what the odds are, to be honest, but I don't think it's like 99 to 1. There are a lot of people who really don't want Trump as a dictator. And I know the Democrat Party, at least the Democrats at the top, seem to be doing nothing. But obviously the legal system is doing something, and people in unions are doing something, and reporters and journalists are doing something, and there are people pushing back. So I don't think necessarily it's like, what is really important is to not just concede that they've won and just be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what the courts say because they're just going to overrule them and they're just going to do it anyway. Yeah, they're going to try and do it anyway. But if you just say, oh, it doesn't matter, I don't care, there's no point in me fighting back, then that's just one less person for them to fight and one less roadblock in their way. And they don't have all the power, all the money, or all the, you know, motivation and energy. And they certainly don't have any of the brains. So I do think that these things are good and positive and should be celebrated as such and are worth pushing for. But they are not worth putting all your hope in. If you're just going to sit there, sit on your hands, smiling at home, being like, oh, it's all right, the lower courts of Montana have this wrapped up. Like, no, it is not good enough. You cannot rely on them. No cis people are coming to save us. If the laws, court rulings, whatever go in our favour, great. That is a very good thing. But you cannot count on them doing so, and you can't count on them being enough. We need to go out there and do stuff. We need to organise. We need to inform people. And we need to get some momentum and push back. And so just on that, I did say with both of these rulings, these are good, but I don't really agree with the framing. So I just wanted to like point out why, and why I think that this is the kind of thing that is maybe slightly a weakness from our side, in that the arguments we have are correct, but they're not like well chiseled propaganda machines in the way that the gender criticals are, like the masters of propaganda, and the Trump administration. I mean, it's the same fucking movement. But so here they said, in this top bit, which one was it here? There is no compelling state interest in eviscerating protections against sex discrimination for individuals whose gender identities do not align with their biological sex. I think we all know what they mean here. They mean trans people. And I do think that you could say that at least some trans people exactly fit this description. But I think this is already in the framing conceding one of the core gender critical premises. And I've said this quite a lot, but I feel like there's two pillars of anti-trans apologetics, the gender critical argument, like the more like the Richard Dawkins position. Because obviously there are people who are just like, calling us slurs and just want to put us in prison or whatever. They're not even trying a rational argument. The gender criticals, the like sex realists, anti-trans apologists, they are trying to make some kind of rational argument. And their two pillar argument is sex is binary and immutable, and that sex property that all humans have, which is binary and immutable, is how we should organize society. And what this ruling is doing is it's looking at these two pillars and it's saying, well, the second one isn't justified. We can't justify removing these people's rights from discrimination, like protections against discrimination, just because whatever, XYZ, which is true. This pillar of the argument is complete bullshit. But in the way they've written it, by describing trans people as individuals whose gender identities do not align with their biological sex, they are implicitly conceding on the other pillar, which is also false. It is more complicated than this. It's not that all trans people are just people who are either men or women with this biological immutable sex characteristic, and then their gender identity can be anything. And it's also not true that when a trans person comes out, they change biological sex in that moment, like instantly. Both of these concepts, gender identity and sex, I'm waving my hands all over the place here, neither of them are binary and neither of them are immutable. And in some cases, your gender identity, how you view yourself, might be some way, and then you might medically transition, changing your sex characteristics so that now they do align with your gender identity. And then really this wording doesn't really cover you anymore. And it's the same with this other part here. Like the judge is saying, doing a bit better. So this judge is like confronting the first pillar of the argument. So it is a step up from this one. But the issue here is they're right to say sex isn't binary, but they haven't really done the best job. And this is because they're a judge rather than a, biologist. But so when they've said, you understand that not everyone has an XY or XX chromosome, right? That is true. And when you pressure some idiot like a Trump lawyer on that, they got no response to that because they haven't been fed the next apologetic. The gender criticals, which have had X decades to, chisel down their point, they have a response to that. They'll say sex isn't just chromosomes. And then you say, well, what is it then? And then they just back off and try and hide because they don't actually have an answer, because they then might say gamete size, and you're like, well, not everyone has gametes. And then they might say gamete potential, and they start trying to create this unmeasurable, invisible property which follows you around regardless of your physical characteristics. And they try and step back so they don't have to make a real argument. But they have some kind of response to confuse people. But so in this case, saying not everyone is XX or XY is a fine retort, but it would be better to say sex isn't binary. For example, there's no way of defining it in a binary manner. If the executive order had specifically said chromosomes, then it'd be fine to point this out. But it didn't actually say chromosomes. It said gamete size. So it would have been better to say, that not everyone produces gametes, and in extremely rare cases, people can have both types of gametes. But there's still kind of fine. But where this is kind of garbage, I mean, it is just wrong, is to say that there are someone who does not just have XX or XY chromosomes is not just male or female. I don't think that that's a very good argument. I think there will be a bunch of intersex people who are not just XX or XY, who absolutely consider themselves just male or female, and who might be like, what? Fuck off. Like, they're intersex, sure, but they're also, like, male. In how they would, like, view themselves and identify themselves, and also how they would describe, like, all of the sex characteristics. It's quite possible that people go their whole lives even without realizing that they have abnormal chromosome setup. I mean, there's the classic example that probably everyone who spent any time arguing on Twitter has ever seen, of the XY cis woman who gave birth to a girl who was XY. And she didn't know, neither of them knew they were XY until later there was some like medical test for some other unrelated condition. And they're like, oh, wow, you're XY. And so, I mean, potentially some of the people out there listening to this now, if you're a cis woman, maybe you're XY. Oh, and if you're a cis man, maybe you're XX. You know, genes are really complicated, chromosomes are really complicated, and sexual development in the womb is really complicated. If you found out, if you were a woman listening to this, and you went and you've given birth to children who have grown up and had their own kids, and you go to the doctors, and the doctor's like, oh, you're XY, are you just going to be like, oh, I'm male now? No, because not only does that not really represent like how you view yourself, but also that wouldn't represent your medical situation at all. And if they put that on your documents, it would be like dangerous for your healthcare. And then saying that there were like each one of these chromosome setups is a different sex is just kind of, I can see where they're coming from. They're just countering it with something that's not quite a good argument, and it's not quite, I mean, the thing is with these kind of things, if you were to take some of the gender criticals at their word and say sex is defined by chromosomes, then yeah, that claim is that there are 30 plus sexes. And in reality is chromosomes are just one sex characteristic of many, and there's more than two possible options. So it's not binary, but that doesn't mean that each one of these possible combinations represents like a whole new category of person. It's that this is one piece of information along with multiple other sex characteristics, gonads, hormones, genitals, like loads, all of these different things, which all add up to give a picture. And the reality is that picture doesn't fit into a binary, but that doesn't then mean the next option is it fits into one of 30 boxes. Like, there isn't a fixed number of boxes that we're fitting people into here, and chromosomes aren't the whole picture. So good on this judge for calling it out. Good on the other ruling for calling out the other pillar. But I do think this is the kind of thing that would be really good if we could teach the wider public the correct argument here in a way that, like, sure, if we got on a flipping like developmental biologist and did some like 10-hour lecture series about how human developmental biology works, that would be correct then. That would be the most information we have about this topic. But you can hone that down to better arguments. And when gender criticals say sex is binary and mutable, and that's how we should organize society, we should be able to say sex isn't binary or immutable, and here's why. And that isn't how we should organize society, and here's why. And that could be, you know, anything from a one-sentence response to a 2-paragraph response to ready to take questions. And I just think that's something we can get in the eyes, the minds, the mouths, the ears, whatever, of journalists and politicians and judges and lawyers and people arguing for our position.